I'm Thea, 34 years old. Weeks ago, I woke up in a recovery room with a 6-inch scar on my back and one kidney missing. I wasn't in an accident. There was no tumor, nothing that required surgery. When I asked the doctor what had happened, he handed me a consent form. The line marked patient signature was blank, but the line marked guardian/legal representative, that had my mother's signature on it. I'm 34 years old. I don't have a guardian. 2 hours later, a detective walked into my room and asked me one question. Do you know where your kidney went? I did. It was inside my brother, 2 floors below me in the same hospital. Before I tell you how I ended up here, please take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if you genuinely want to hear this story. And if you're watching, let me know where you're from and what time it is there. I'd love to know who's listening. Now let me take you back 2 months, to the day my brother was diagnosed with end-stage kidney failure. My family has always operated on one unspoken rule: Marcus comes first. My father, Gerald Reynolds, spent 35 years running a hardware store in our small Pennsylvania town before retiring. He's the kind of man who believes the world makes sense as long as everyone knows their place. Men provide, women support, and sons carry the family name. My mother, Linda, never worked a day outside the home. Her entire identity revolved around being Gerald's wife and Marcus's mother. Notice I didn't say Anthea's mother. That's because, in our family, I was always an afterthought, a supporting character in someone else's story. Marcus is 38. He's charming when he wants to be, which usually means when he needs something. In the past 15 years, he's held 6 different jobs, none longer than 2 years. Every failure came with an excuse: the economy, bad bosses, bad luck, and every time my parents were there to catch him. Me? I put myself through nursing school, worked double shifts for years, saved every penny until I could buy my own 1-bedroom apartment in Philadelphia. Nothing fancy, just mine. My nursing certification hangs on the wall next to a pothos plant that somehow keeps surviving despite my schedule. Last Thanksgiving, I came home with news about my promotion to OR nurse supervisor. I was proud. For once, I thought they might be too. My father looked up from his plate and asked, "Is Marcus coming this year?" That was it. That was my celebration. There's one other thing you should know about me. I'm the only person in my family with O-negative blood. Universal donor. My mother mentioned it once when I was 17. Good thing we have Thea, she said. She can give blood to anyone. I didn't think much of it at the time. I should have. 6 weeks before I lost my kidney, my phone rang at 2 a.m. It was my mother, and she was crying. Not the gentle kind of tears she uses when she wants sympathy. These were real. Raw. "It's Marcus," she said. "He's in the hospital. His kidneys are failing." I drove 3 hours through the dark to get there. Whatever our history, he was still my brother. The diagnosis was brutal: end-stage renal disease. Both kidneys were essentially dead. The cause? 15 years of heavy drinking. The kind of drinking my parents had always dismissed as just blowing off steam or going through a phase. The phase had destroyed his organs. When I walked into his room, Marcus looked gray. Smaller somehow, despite always being the larger-than-life golden child. Tubes connected him to a dialysis machine, doing the work his body could no longer manage. On his wrist, I noticed a Rolex. Fake, I knew, but expensive-looking. A gift to himself from money our parents had loaned him. My father stood at the foot of the bed like a general surveying a battlefield. "The doctors say he needs a transplant within 3 months," he said. "Or he won't make it." 3 months. The transplant waiting list averages 5 to 7 years. My mother clutched her rosary beads, her lips moving in silent prayer. She looked at me, then at Marcus, then back at me. Something cold moved through my chest. The way they were looking at me, it wasn't worry, it was calculation. My father's gaze settled on me for a long moment before returning to Marcus. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. In that moment, I felt it, the shift. Like I'd just been appraised, measured. Like I was no longer his daughter. I was inventory. A week after the diagnosis, my mother invited me to dinner. Family meeting, she called it, to discuss next steps. I drove to their house, the same colonial I'd grown up in. Nothing about it had changed. Same oak dining table, same china cabinet with the good plates we never used, same portrait of Marcus's high school football championship above the fireplace. There was no portrait of me anywhere. We sat down to pot roast. My father took his place at the head of the table, as he always did, and cleared his throat. "I've been doing some research," he said, cutting into his meat without looking up. "The transplant list is long. Very long. Most people don't make it." My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. If only there were another way. If only someone in the family was compatible. She let the sentence hang there, a hook dangling in the water. I kept eating. I knew what they were doing. I just wanted to see how far they'd take it. "Thea," my father said, finally meeting my eyes. "You're O negative. Universal donor. That's rare. Special. Special." The first time he'd ever called me that. "We're not asking," he added quickly. "We're just thinking out loud." Marcus stayed silent the entire dinner. He looked at his phone, scrolled through something, typed a quick message. When I stood to clear the dishes, I caught a glimpse of his screen before he could hide it. A text to my father. "She's thinking about it." I wasn't thinking about it, but they didn't know that yet. I said goodnight, drove home, and tried to convince myself that my family, my own flesh and blood, wouldn't actually expect me to give up an organ without asking. I was wrong. A few days after that dinner, I asked to meet my parents alone. We sat in their living room, me on the love seat, them on the couch across from me. The afternoon light came through the windows, catching dust motes in the air. Everything felt suspended, waiting. "I've thought about it," I said. "And the answer is no." The silence that followed was physical, heavy. My mother's face crumpled. "No? What do you mean, no?" "I mean, I'm not donating my kidney to Marcus." My father's jaw tightened. "And why the hell not?" I had prepared for this. Because I need both my kidneys for my own long-term health. Because kidney donation has real risks. Infection, chronic pain, reduced kidney function. And because Marcus's condition is the result of choices he made. Choices everyone in this family enabled for 15 years. The explosion came faster than I expected. "You'd let your brother die?" My father slammed his palm against the armrest. "Your own blood? For what? Spite?" My mother was crying now, the theatrical kind. "I raised you, Thea. I fed you, clothed you, kept a roof over your head. And this is how you repay me?" I stood. My body isn't a repayment plan. I walked out to my car, a Honda Civic I'd bought myself, with money I'd earned, and sat in the driver's seat for a full minute before starting the engine. I thought it was over. I thought they'd be angry for a while, then accept it. Move on. As I pulled onto the highway, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "You'll regret this." I told myself it was a wrong number. I didn't believe it. The weeks that followed were quiet in a way that should have been a warning. First, I was removed from the family group chat. No announcement, no explanation, just suddenly unable to see messages from the people I'd known my entire life. Then a coworker, Jenny from radiology, stopped me in the hallway. "Hey, this is weird, but did you know someone called the hospital asking about you?" My stomach dropped. What did they ask? "Something about your mental health, whether you'd shown any erratic behavior." She made air quotes. HR talked to them. They wouldn't leave a name. I went to HR that afternoon. The manager, a woman named Patricia with bifocals and a permanent frown, confirmed it. "Someone claimed you have mental health concerns affecting job performance," she said, reading from a note. "Anonymous caller. We're required to document it, but there's been no observed issues. Still, is there anything you want to tell us?" I told her no. There wasn't. But I knew. I knew who had made that call. That weekend, I visited my mother. She was at the kitchen table with her laptop open, scrolling through something. When she saw me, she slammed it shut. "Just checking emails," she said too quickly. But I'd seen it. The subject line of whatever she'd been reading. Plan B, timeline. "What's Plan B?" I asked. She laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Nothing. Work stuff." My mother didn't work. I should have pushed harder. I should have demanded answers. Instead, I let her pour me coffee and pretend everything was normal. I was still trying to believe the best about them. That was my mistake. I learned what Plan B meant much later, after the surgery, after the investigation, after everything fell apart. This is what the FBI pieced together. 3 days after I refused to donate, my father drove 45 minutes to Briarwood Country Club. He met Dr. Howard Mercer on the ninth green, a transplant surgeon he'd been golfing with for 20 years. They walked the back nine together while my father explained the situation. "My daughter has some mental health issues," he said. According to Dr. Mercer's eventual testimony, my father was calm, reasonable, sympathetic even. "Nothing severe, but enough that she can't make major medical decisions on her own. The family has informal guardianship. We need to move forward with the transplant, and she can't consent herself." Dr. Mercer raised the obvious concern. Living organ donation required an independent living donor advocate, someone whose sole job was to protect the donor's interests. There were psychological evaluations, ethics committee reviews, multiple consent conversations. My father had anticipated this. "Riverside is a private surgical center," Dr. Mercer said in his deposition. "Not a major hospital system. We didn't have the same oversight infrastructure. I handled the transplant program personally. The advocate, the psych eval, the ethics review, I could streamline those, consolidate them." What he meant was, he could skip them entirely. My father asked what it would take. Dr. Mercer named his price, $50,000 to his personal foundation, plus a guarantee that if anything went wrong, Gerald would take full responsibility. They shook hands on the 18th hole. My father handed him a check, $50,000, a donation to Dr. Mercer's personal foundation. The date was set. The plan was simple. Lure me to a different hospital, one where no one knew me. Sedate me before I could ask questions. Perform the surgery. By the time I woke up, it would be done. "She's a daughter," my father reportedly said. "She's not married, no kids. What does she need 2 kidneys for? She should be grateful to help her brother. This is what family does." I found out later that this wasn't even his first attempt. 10 years earlier, when Marcus had his first health scare, a liver issue that resolved on its own, my father had made a similar inquiry. Could a family member donate part of their liver without full consent? Dr. Mercer had said no then. This time he said yes. 2 weeks after I refused, my mother called. She was crying, but soft this time, gentle, the voice she used when she wanted forgiveness. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, "about how things ended between us. It wasn't right, Thea. You're my daughter. Whatever happens with Marcus, you're still my daughter." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. "Your father and I talked," she continued. "We want to make things right. We scheduled a family checkup at a clinic outside the city, all of us together. A fresh start. A way to bond again." Something felt off. The timing, the sweetness. But 3 weeks of silence had worn me down. 3 weeks of being erased from my own family. And there was something else. Something I'm ashamed to admit. A part of me still wanted to believe. Still wanted my mother to be the person I'd needed her to be my whole life. That part of me whispered, maybe they've realized they were wrong. Maybe this is their way of apologizing. I know now that hope can be a trap. But back then, I couldn't see it. "Just a checkup?" I asked. "Just a checkup. And maybe lunch after. Please, Thea." I said yes. The day of the appointment, I drove to Riverside Medical Center, a private surgical facility about an hour from Philadelphia. Not a hospital in the traditional sense, more of a boutique clinic for people who could afford discretion. The kind of place with marble floors and fresh flowers in the lobby. The kind of place where the wealthy went for procedures they didn't want on their regular medical records. Cosmetic surgery, wellness retreats, and apparently, organ harvesting. I learned later that Riverside operated outside the major hospital networks. No affiliation with university medical centers. No mandatory reporting to regional transplant coordinators. Dr. Mercer had helped establish their transplant program himself, which meant he'd also written the oversight protocols. Or rather, the lack of them. But standing in that lobby, I didn't know any of this. I just saw the marble, the flowers, the professional smiles. My mother met me in the parking lot wearing a cashmere cardigan I'd never seen before. "A little gift," she said, pressing a matching one into my hands. For my girl. We walked in together. I signed in at reception. And then something strange happened. The nurse called only my name. Reynolds? Thea Reynolds? I looked around. My father wasn't there. Neither was Marcus. They're running late, my mother said. Go ahead. They'll catch up. I followed the nurse down a long corridor. I didn't see my father standing outside the window, watching me disappear through the double doors. I didn't see him nod at someone inside. I walked into that room, trusting my mother. I shouldn't have. The examination room was cold. Not air conditioning cold. Something deeper. The kind of cold that creeps into your bones before you realize something is wrong. A nurse handed me a paper gown and a cup of water. Change into this. We'll need some blood samples before the doctor sees you. Drink this first. It helps with the draw. I looked at the cup. Something flickered in the back of my mind. A warning I couldn't quite name. I'm an OR nurse. I know procedures. And something about this felt off. But the nurse was smiling. The room was clean, professional. My mother was in the waiting area. What was I afraid of? That my own family would drug me? The thought seemed absurd, paranoid, so I drank it. That's the thing about trust. Even when it's broken, even when every sign points to danger, some part of us still wants to believe we're safe with the people who raised us. I wasn't safe. The nurse took 3 vials of blood. Standard. Then she left. And I waited. The room started to tilt. Just slightly at first. A softness at the edges of my vision. Then more. The fluorescent lights overhead seemed to pulse. My hands felt heavy. Something's wrong. I tried to stand and nearly fell. My legs wouldn't cooperate. My thoughts were turning to cotton. The water. They put something in the water. I reached for my phone on the chair next to me. My fingers couldn't grip it. The screen blurred. The door opened. Through the haze, I saw him. My father, standing in the hallway. His face was blank, not angry, not sad, just resolved, like a man finishing a task he'd been putting off. He nodded at someone I couldn't see. The nurse who'd given me the water stepped back into view. She wasn't nervous anymore. Her movements were efficient, practiced. She'd done this before. I learned her name later, Patricia Vance. She'd worked with Dr. Mercer for 12 years. She was the one who'd witnessed my mother's signature on the consent form, who'd checked the box confirming the patient's guardian had been properly identified and verified. She was also the one who'd administered the sedative in my water, timed perfectly, so I'd be too impaired to object by the time anyone needed my consent. A doctor stepped into my field of vision. White coat, gray hair, the face of someone's grandfather. Don't worry, he said. You won't remember any of this. I tried to scream. My mouth wouldn't move. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was my father turning away, not watching, not waiting, walking off like a man who'd done what needed to be done. What I'm about to tell you comes from the investigation, from depositions and medical records and testimony that would eventually be read aloud in a federal courtroom. The surgery took 4 hours. Dr. Howard Mercer, board-certified transplant surgeon, made a 6-inch incision along my lower left back. He separated muscle, moved organs, and carefully excised my left kidney, healthy, functioning, mine. In the operating notes he wrote, living donor nephrectomy, donor consent obtained via legal guardian due to documented cognitive impairment. Independent evaluation waived per family request, patient unable to participate in standard assessment, procedure uncomplicated. The paperwork was meticulous. A forged psychological evaluation, supposedly conducted by a Dr. Rahman who didn't exist. A fabricated ethics committee approval, signed by Dr. Mercer himself as committee chair. A donor advocate form with Patricia Vance's signature, claiming she'd met with me privately and confirmed my willingness to donate. None of it was real. But it looked real. It would pass a casual audit. And at Riverside, no one was auditing. Consent. As if my mother signing a piece of paper made any of this legal. As if a stack of forged documents could erase the fact that I was a competent adult who had never agreed to any of this. While I was on the table, unconscious and cut open, my kidney was rushed to another operating room down the hall. Marcus was already prepped, waiting. In the family waiting area, my parents sat together. My father read a newspaper. My mother held her rosary beads, lips moving in prayer. Later, she would tell investigators she was praying for a successful outcome for the whole family. She wasn't praying for my safety. She wasn't asking God for forgiveness. She was thanking him. Thanking him that they'd found a way to save their son, the real child, the one who mattered, using parts harvested from the other one. At 3:47 p.m., Dr. Mercer closed my incision. At 4:12 p.m., my kidney began functioning inside my brother's body. At 6:30 p.m., my parents left the hospital together, arm in arm. They stopped for dinner on the way home, celebrated with wine. Meanwhile, I lay alone in recovery, stitched up and hollowed out. They didn't visit my room that night. They didn't need to. They'd gotten what they came for. I woke to pain, not the dull ache of a hangover or the sharp sting of a cut. Something deeper, something wrong. Like my body was screaming at me in a language I couldn't quite understand. My eyes opened to white ceiling tiles, fluorescent lights, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, a recovery room. I tried to sit up and gasped. Fire exploded across my lower back. My hand flew to the source and found bandages, thick gauze, medical tape, a surgical incision. What happened? My mind raced backward. The examination room, the cup of water, the dizziness. My father's face in the doorway. Oh God. Oh God, no, I'm an OR nurse. I've assisted on hundreds of surgeries. I know exactly what a nephrectomy incision feels like. I know what it means when you wake up with 6 inches of stitches on your flank and a deep, hollow ache where an organ used to be. I pressed the call button. Once, twice, 3 times. A nurse appeared, young, nervous, avoiding my eyes. Miss Reynolds, you're awake. I'll get the doctor. What surgery did I have? My voice came out ragged. What did they do to me? The doctor will explain everything. I'm an OR nurse. I know what this incision is. Tell me. She looked at the floor, at the monitors, anywhere but at me. Please wait for the doctor. She left. I lay there staring at the ceiling, one hand pressed against the bandages on my back. I knew the answer. I knew it the moment I woke up, but I needed to hear someone say it. I needed to see the proof. I needed to know exactly what my family had done to me. Dr. Howard Mercer walked into my room like a man expecting gratitude. He was 60 or so, silver-haired, wearing the confident smile of someone who'd spent decades being respected. His white coat was pristine. His handshake would have been firm if I'd offered my hand. I didn't. Miss Reynolds, he said, settling into the chair beside my bed. Good to see you awake. The procedure went beautifully. Your brother is recovering well, and your kidney is already functioning in his body. You should be very proud. I didn't consent to any procedure. His smile faltered, just for a moment. Of course you did. Well, your guardian did, on your behalf. I don't have a guardian. I'm 34 years old. He reached into the folder he'd brought and produced a single sheet of paper, a consent form, standard hospital issue, the kind I'd seen hundreds of times. The line marked patient signature was blank. The line marked guardian/legal representative contained my mother's signature. Your mother signed as your medical guardian, Dr. Mercer said, as if this explained everything. Given your condition. What condition? Your parents explain that you have cognitive difficulties, that you're unable to make complex medical decisions on your own. I stared at him. Dr. Mercer, I said slowly, I am an operating room nurse with 10 years of experience. I have a bachelor's degree and multiple professional certifications. I live alone, manage my own finances, and hold a job that requires me to make life or death decisions daily. His face went pale. This signature, I continued, holding up the form, has no legal standing. Under federal law, performing surgery without informed consent on a mentally competent adult is assault and battery. I am looking at evidence of a felony. He didn't say anything, neither did I. The form said everything that needed to be said. My parents arrived an hour later with flowers, lilies, the expensive kind from the florist downtown, wrapped in cream-colored paper. My mother carried them like an offering. My father walked 2 steps behind her, hands in his pockets, looking around the room like he was inspecting a property he might buy. There's our girl, my mother said, setting the flowers on my bedside table. How are you feeling? I looked at her, at the woman who had pushed me on swings, braided my hair for school photos, sat beside my bed when I had the flu. The woman who had signed a piece of paper that let strangers cut me open. You took my kidney. Her smile didn't waver. Oh, honey, we saved your brother. You were part of something beautiful. Without asking me, without telling me, you drugged me and let them cut out my organ. My father stepped forward. Thea, don't be dramatic. It's done now, and Marcus is going to live. You should feel good about that. I should feel good? You're a young woman, he said, and his voice had that tone, the one he used when explaining something obvious to someone slow. No husband, no children. What did you need 2 kidneys for? Marcus has a future, a real future. And I don't? He shrugged. You're a daughter. Daughters sacrifice for their families. That's how it works. My mother nodded. We knew you'd understand eventually. You just needed a little push. I looked at them, really looked, searching for guilt, for shame, for any sign that they understood what they'd done. There was nothing. They believed they were right. They believed I owed them this. And in that moment I realized something that broke me and freed me at the same time. I had never been their daughter. I had always been their spare parts. After my parents left, satisfied, smiling, certain they'd done nothing wrong, I lay in the dark for a long time. The machines beeped, the IV dripped. Somewhere down the hall, someone coughed. I thought about letting it go. I thought about what it would mean to fight them. The lawyers, the accusations, the family that would call me ungrateful, vindictive, cruel. I thought about Marcus, somewhere in this same building, waking up with my kidney inside him, living because they'd taken a piece of me without asking. And then I picked up my phone. The hospital hadn't taken it. Why would they? I was supposed to be a willing donor, a loving sister, someone who'd wake up grateful for the chance to help. I dialed 911. I need to report an assault, I said. My voice was steady. I'd found something on the other side of despair, not peace, but clarity. I was brought to Riverside Medical Center under false pretenses. I was sedated without my consent, and while I was unconscious, a surgeon removed my kidney. The dispatcher asked me to repeat myself. I did. My parents signed a consent form claiming to be my legal guardians. I am a 34-year-old mentally competent adult. I have no guardians. This is organ theft. This is a federal crime. 2 hours later, a woman in a dark blazer walked into my room. Detective Vivian Carter, FBI, assigned to the healthcare fraud unit. She was about 45 with close-cropped gray hair and the kind of face that gave nothing away. She sat in the chair where Dr. Mercer had sat and pulled out a notebook. Miss Reynolds, she said, I have one question for you. I waited. Do you know where your kidney went? I looked at her. Yes, it's inside my brother, room 412, 2 floors down. She wrote something in her notebook. Then she looked up. Tell me everything. Can you imagine it? Your own parents, the people who were supposed to protect you, becoming the ones who took a piece of your body without asking. If you're watching this, and you've ever felt like your family didn't respect your boundaries, like your no didn't matter, I want you to know, you're not alone. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you are in your own journey. But this story is just beginning. Because the detective asked me a question, and what I found out next changed everything. Detective Carter didn't react when I told her my kidney was in my brother. She just wrote it down, methodical, calm, like she'd heard worse. Maybe she had. Cases like this are more common than people think, she said, flipping to a new page in her notebook. Family organ trafficking. Usually it's overseas, but we've seen it domestically too. A parent decides one child is more valuable than another. A spouse decides they need their partner's kidney. People rationalize incredible things when they're desperate. She paused. The system is supposed to prevent this. Independent advocates, psych evals, ethics committees. But those safeguards only work if everyone follows them. When you have a rogue physician at a private facility with minimal oversight, operating outside the major hospital networks, she shook her head. The guardrails disappear. How does someone like Mercer get away with it? He built his own kingdom, small facility, hand-picked staff, no external reporting requirements. The patients who come to places like Riverside want privacy. They're not asking questions about protocol, And the transplant coordinators at the major centers, they never see these cases. They happen completely off the books. This wasn't desperation, I said. This was planning, months of it. Walk me through it, from the beginning. So I did. I told her about Marcus's diagnosis, the family dinner, the pressure that started subtle and turned explicit, my refusal, the silence that followed, the anonymous call to my HR department, the family checkup that was never a checkup. I told her about the email I'd glimpsed on my mother's laptop. Plan B, timeline. Detective Carter's pen stopped moving. Plan B? I don't know what was in it, but I saw the subject line. We can get a warrant for email records, she said. If there's a paper trail, we'll find it. She stood, tucking her notebook into her jacket pocket. Miss Reynolds, I need to be honest with you. Proving this won't be easy. Your family will claim you were impaired, that you couldn't consent, that they were acting in your best interest. I have 10 years of performance reviews that say otherwise. Good. Keep every piece of documentation you can find. She paused at the door. One more thing. The doctor who performed the surgery, Howard Mercer, we've had our eye on him before. This might not be his first time. She left. And I lay there, realizing that what happened to me might have happened to others, that I might not be the only one. The counterattack came within 24 hours. I was still in the hospital, still recovering from having an organ removed against my will. I was still in the hospital when I received a certified letter. It came from a law firm downtown, Richards, Hartley, and Associates. The cover letter was brief. Enclosed, please find a copy of the statement provided to investigators by our client, Gerald Reynolds, regarding recent allegations. Included was a copy of my father's official statement. Inside was a copy of the statement. I read it with shaking hands. My daughter, Thea Reynolds, has a history of mental instability. As her parents, we have informally acted as her guardians for years. She is unable to make complex decisions regarding her own health care. The surgery was performed with proper family consent and was entirely legal. Attached were documents I'd never seen. A letter of concern sent to my employer 6 months earlier, claiming I'd shown erratic behavior at a family gathering. Notes from a supposed conversation with a family therapist I'd never met. And the anonymous HR complaint, traced, I later learned, directly to my father's cell phone. They had built a paper trail, a narrative of a broken daughter who needed protecting from herself. That afternoon, my hospital called. Miss Reynolds, given the circumstances, we're placing you on administrative leave pending investigation. What circumstances? We've received documentation suggesting you may have mental health concerns that affect your ability to perform your duties. They'd gotten to my job before I could defend myself. I sat in my hospital bed, stitched up and alone, holding the evidence of my family's betrayal. They had taken my kidney, now they were trying to take my career, my reputation, my sanity. And I almost let them. Almost. 3 days later, I went home to an empty apartment. The pothos on my windowsill had started to yellow. Nobody had watered it while I was gone. Nobody had known I was gone. I lowered myself onto my couch, slowly, carefully, the stitches in my back pulling with every movement, and stared at the wall. No job, no family, no one who believed me. My parents had spent weeks constructing a version of me that didn't exist. An unstable woman who couldn't be trusted, whose word meant nothing. And they'd done it so thoroughly that even my own hospital had doubted me. I thought about the hearing that would come. My father in his blazer, my mother with her tissues, both of them weeping about their troubled daughter who'd made up terrible lies because she couldn't accept their love. I thought about Marcus, recovering with my kidney inside him, probably already rehearsing his testimony about how I'd wanted to help, but my mental issues made me forget. I walked to the bathroom mirror and lifted my shirt. The bandage was still there, underneath it, a scar that would never fully heal. Evidence. But would it be enough? I sat back down and put my head in my hands. For the first time since waking up in that recovery room, I cried. I cried until I couldn't breathe, until my whole body shook, until the stitches burned and I didn't care. I almost gave up that night. I almost decided they would win, that they always won, that people like my father always got what they wanted, and people like me always paid the price. Then my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Thea, it's Nathan Cole from OR. I saw your file. Something doesn't add up. Can we talk? I stared at the screen, and I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. I met Nathan Cole at a coffee shop 3 miles from the hospital, far enough that we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. He was in his early 40s, a quiet man with kind eyes who'd worked as an anesthesiologist in our OR for as long as I could remember. We'd never been close, just colleagues who nodded at each other over surgical masks, but I'd always trusted him. He had a laptop open on the table when I arrived. I shouldn't be doing this, he said, not bothering with pleasantries. If anyone finds out I accessed your records, I'm done. But I saw your name on the suspension list, and I knew something was wrong. What did you find? He turned the laptop toward me. It was my anesthesia record from Riverside Medical Center, the hospital where I'd been operated on. Look at the timeline, he said, pointing. You were administered a sedative at 10:47 a.m. The consent form is time-stamped 10:32 a.m. He looked at me. You were drugged 15 minutes before anyone claims consent was obtained. My hands started shaking. And here, he scrolled down. The attending note says patient sedated at family's request prior to consent verification. That's a massive protocol violation. You're supposed to verify consent before sedation, not after. This is either gross negligence or they knew I wouldn't consent. Exactly. He pulled out a USB drive. I made copies, everything. The anesthesia record, the surgical notes, the consent form with the timeline discrepancies. This isn't just malpractice, Thea. This is evidence of conspiracy. I took the drive. It felt weightless, impossibly small to contain something so important. Why are you helping me? Nathan closed his laptop. Because I've worked with you for 6 years. You're one of the most competent nurses I know, and the idea that you couldn't consent to your own surgery? He shook his head. That's insulting. To you, and to everyone who's ever worked beside you. I didn't trust myself to speak, so I just held the drive and let myself believe, for the first time, that I might actually win. 2 days later, Detective Carter called. We got the warrant for the email records, she said. Miss Reynolds, you need to come see this. The FBI field office in Philadelphia was everything you'd expect. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since the Reagan administration. Detective Carter led me to a conference room where printed emails were spread across the table like evidence of a crime scene. Because they were. Plan B, Carter said, tapping the first sheet. Your father sent this to your mother and brother 2 days after you refused to donate. I picked it up. Linda, I talked to Mercer. He says if we can document Thea as mentally incompetent, we can sign as guardians. We need to move fast. Marcus doesn't have much time. There were more. Make the appointment at Mercer's hospital. Tell her it's a family checkup. Don't mention anything else. Howard confirmed he'll accept the guardian consent. The fee is $50,000 to his foundation. Make sure she doesn't bring her phone inside. We don't want any recordings. And then, the one that hit me hardest, an email from Marcus. Thanks, Dad. This is the only way. She owes us anyway. She owes us. 28 years of being the overlooked daughter, the one who was never good enough, the one who worked and saved and built a life from nothing, and in my brother's mind, I still owed them. These emails establish premeditation, Carter said. Conspiracy to commit assault, medical fraud, forgery. We have enough for a grand jury. I set the paper down carefully. What happens now? Now? We arrest them. I nodded. I should have felt triumphant. Vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. But somewhere underneath the exhaustion, there was something else. Resolve. They'd taken my kidney. They wouldn't take anything else. The next week moved fast. First came the FBI's official statement to my hospital's HR department. I watched Patricia's face change as she read it. The same woman who had questioned me about mental health concerns, now learning that those concerns had been manufactured by people planning to steal my organs. Miss Reynolds, she said, folding her hands on her desk, on behalf of the hospital, I want to offer our sincerest apologies. The email arrived an hour later. Full reinstatement, back pay, A formal letter of apology from the hospital's CEO, printed on heavy cream-colored letterhead. We regret the distress caused by the allegations made against you. Our investigation has confirmed that these allegations were false and appear to have been part of a coordinated effort to defame you. We are grateful for your years of service and look forward to welcoming you back. I read it 3 times. Then I put it in a folder with the other evidence, more documentation, more proof. Detective Carter called that afternoon. We traced the anonymous HR complaint, she said. The call came from your father's cell phone. He didn't even try to hide it. He didn't think he'd need to. No, he didn't. A pause. There's something else. We've started looking into Dr. Mercer's other cases. Preliminary review suggests your surgery wasn't an isolated incident. There may be other victims. Other victims. Other daughters or sons or spouses, carved up while they slept because someone decided their organs were more valuable than their autonomy. When is the hearing? I asked. Grand jury convened yesterday. Indictments came down this morning. Gerald Reynolds, Linda Reynolds, Marcus Reynolds, and Howard Mercer. Charges include conspiracy, assault with bodily harm, medical fraud, and forgery. And the arrests? Already done. Your parents were taken into custody 2 hours ago. Marcus was arrested at the hospital. He's still recovering, but he's well enough for a jail cell. I exhaled. It had started. 1 month later, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror in a navy blue suit I'd bought specifically for this occasion. The subpoena sat on my kitchen counter. My name in black letters, summoning me to testify at the preliminary hearing for United States versus Reynolds. Today, I would sit in a federal courtroom and tell a judge what my family had done to me. I would look at my parents, the people who raised me, fed me, claimed to love me, and explain how they'd drugged me, cut me open, and stolen a piece of my body. Detective Carter had warned me it would be difficult. Defense attorneys live for moments like this, she'd said. They'll try to paint you as unstable, vindictive, a daughter scorning her loving family. I know. You can't get emotional. You can't raise your voice. You have to be calm, factual, and unshakable. I'm an OR nurse. I've held people's hearts in my hands while surgeons repaired them. I can handle this. She'd looked at me for a long moment. Then she'd nodded. Now, staring at my reflection, I practiced the words I would say. The facts, the timeline, the consent form with my mother's signature. No tears, no pleading, just truth. My phone buzzed. A text from Nathan. You've got this. We're all watching. I allowed myself a small smile. Then I grabbed my purse, locked my apartment, and drove to the federal courthouse. The building loomed against a gray November sky. Columns, marble steps, flags snapping in the wind. News vans lined the street. The story had leaked. Local family accused of organ theft. I walked past the cameras without looking at them. Whatever happened next, I would face it head on. No more hiding, no more silence. Today, the truth would speak. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Federal preliminary hearings don't have juries, just a judge, the attorneys, and the defendants. But the gallery was packed. Reporters filled the back rows, notebooks open, pens ready. A few faces I recognized from the hospital sat scattered throughout, colleagues who'd come to support me, and at the defense table, my family. My father wore a blazer I'd seen 100 times, navy blue, slightly too tight across the shoulders. He sat ramrod straight, jaw clenched, radiating the same stubborn certainty he'd had my entire life. Even now, facing federal charges, he looked like a man who believed he'd done nothing wrong. My mother sat beside him, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. She'd dressed in black, as if attending a funeral. Her own, maybe, or the death of the family she'd sacrificed everything to preserve. And Marcus. My brother was pale, thinner than I'd ever seen him. The surgery and subsequent arrest had aged him 10 years. He stared at the table, unable or unwilling to meet my eyes. The kidney inside him, my kidney, was keeping him alive. I wondered if he thought about that, if every beat of his heart reminded him of what they'd done. I took my seat behind the prosecutor's table. The judge entered. Everyone rose. This court will come to order. We are here for the preliminary hearing in the matter of United States versus Gerald Reynolds, Linda Reynolds, Marcus Reynolds, and Howard Mercer. The gavel fell, and I felt something settle inside me. Not peace, not yet, but certainty. They had operated in shadows, in lies, in the assumption that I would stay quiet, stay small, stay the obedient daughter they'd always expected. But here, in this room, there were no shadows, only light, and I was ready. Please state your name for the record. Thea Marie Reynolds. The prosecutor, a sharp-featured woman named Diane Walsh, stood near the witness box. Miss Reynolds, can you describe your relationship with the defendants? They're my family. Gerald is my father, Linda is my mother, Marcus is my older brother. And prior to October 14th of this year, how would you characterize that relationship? I took a breath. Complicated. I was never the priority. That was always Marcus. Can you tell the court what happened on October 14th? So I did. I walked through every detail. The diagnosis, the pressure to donate, my refusal, the silence that followed, the anonymous complaints to my employer, the family checkup that was a trap. I described waking up in recovery with stitches in my back and a missing organ. I described the consent form with my mother's signature. I described looking at my parents as they brought flowers and told me I should be grateful. The courtroom was silent. Even the reporters had stopped writing. When I finished, the prosecutor asked one final question. Miss Reynolds, when you discovered your mother had signed as your guardian, what did you think? I looked at my parents. My mother's hands were shaking. My father's jaw was tight. I thought, for the first time in my life, I saw them clearly. A long pause. I thought I finally understood what I was to them. Not a daughter, not a person, just parts. Spare parts for the child who mattered. The words hung in the air. Somewhere in the gallery, I heard someone crying. I didn't look to see who. I just kept my eyes forward, calm, factual, unshakable, just like I promised. Sitting in that witness box, looking at my parents for the first time since the hospital, the people I'd spent my whole life trying to please, I finally understood something. I was never going to be enough for them. Not because I was flawed, but because they were. If this story is hitting close to home, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes knowing you're not alone is the first step. But what happened next, when my father lost control, that's when everything changed. The defense attorney was a silver-haired man named Richard Hartley. He specialized in complex family matters, according to his website. What that meant, I learned quickly, was making victims sound like villains. Miss Reynolds, he said, approaching the witness box with a folder in his hands. You've described yourself as mentally competent, but isn't it true you've struggled with emotional regulation in the past? No. You've never had any incidents at work? Any conflicts with colleagues? I've been employed as an OR nurse for 10 years with exemplary performance reviews. He pulled a paper from his folder. I have here a complaint filed with your hospital's HR department. Filed anonymously, by my father, using his personal cell phone. The FBI traced it. The courtroom murmured. Hartley's smile flickered. Miss Reynolds, isn't it possible that your family, who clearly loves you, simply wanted to help you make a medical decision you were unable to make yourself? Before I could answer, a voice thundered from the defense table. She owes us! My father was on his feet, face purple with rage, jabbing a finger in my direction. I fed her, clothed her, kept a roof over her head, and she has the nerve to sit there and— Mr. Reynolds, the judge's gavel cracked. Sit down! She's a daughter, daughter's sacrifice. That's how it's always been. That's how it's supposed to be. Two bailiffs moved toward him. My mother was pulling at his sleeve, crying. Marcus had his head in his hands, but my father kept going, screaming now, veins bulging. You think you're better than us? You're nothing! You're spare parts, Thea. That's all you've ever been! The bailiffs forced him back into his chair. The courtroom was dead silent, and I sat in the witness box perfectly still and let his words echo. He'd said out loud what they'd always believed. Now everyone knew. After a 15-minute recess, during which my father was warned that another outburst would result in contempt charges, the prosecutor called for the evidence to be presented. A large screen was wheeled into the courtroom. Your Honor, Diane Walsh said. The prosecution would like to enter into evidence a series of emails recovered from the defendant's personal accounts. The first email appeared on screen. Linda, I talked to Mercer. He says if we can document Thea as mentally incompetent, we can sign as guardians. We need to move fast. A murmur swept through the gallery. The second email. Make the appointment at Mercer's hospital. Tell her it's a family checkup. Don't mention anything else. My mother's hands flew to her mouth. The third. Make sure she doesn't bring her phone inside. We don't want any recordings. The fourth. Howard confirmed he'll accept the guardian consent. The fee is $50,000 to his foundation. And finally, the one from Marcus. Thanks, Dad. This is the only way. She owes us anyway. The prosecutor let the silence stretch. These emails, she said, demonstrate clear premeditation. The defendants planned this surgery weeks in advance. They deliberately deceived Miss Reynolds. They paid a medical professional to participate in an illegal procedure. And they created a false paper trail to discredit their victim before she could even report the crime. She turned to the judge. This is not a family making a difficult medical decision. This is conspiracy. This is fraud. This is assault. The judge looked at my family. My father was staring at the wall. My mother was crying silently. Marcus hadn't lifted his head since his father's outburst. Based on the evidence presented, the judge said slowly, this court finds sufficient cause to proceed to trial. The gavel fell, and I exhaled for the first time in months. 2 weeks after the preliminary hearing, Detective Carter called with news. Dr. Mercer took a deal. I was in my apartment, finally back at work, finally starting to feel like myself again. What kind of deal? Full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. He's testifying against your family. A pause. And Thea? What he's saying, you should hear it from me first. We met at the FBI field office that afternoon. The deposition transcript was thick, 50 pages of Dr. Mercer explaining exactly how my family had approached him, what they'd said, what they'd paid. But it was page 43 that stopped my heart. Siem, was this the first time Gerald Reynolds approached you about a family organ donation? A. No. Approximately 10 years ago, when Marcus Reynolds had a health scare involving his liver, Gerald contacted me. He asked whether it would be possible to procure a liver segment from his daughter without her explicit consent. Q. And what was your response at that time? A. I told him it wasn't possible. The oversight was too strict. Q. Did he indicate he would pursue other options? A. He said, and I quote, keep her in mind, she's my backup plan. I set the transcript down. 10 years ago. When I was 24, just starting my nursing career, proudly independent, my father was already calling me his backup plan, his insurance policy, spare parts he could cash in whenever the real child needed them. He planned this for a decade, I said. Detective Carter nodded. At minimum. I thought about all those years, the holidays I'd shown up to, trying to earn their approval, the dinners where I was invisible, the birthday cards I sent that were never acknowledged. I had been auditioning for a part in a family that had already cast me as something else. I just hadn't known my role. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, handwritten on lined paper, postmarked from the Federal Detention Center where Marcus was being held awaiting trial. I recognized his handwriting, the same messy scrawl I'd seen on birthday cards when we were kids. Dear Thea, I don't expect you to read this. I wouldn't blame you if you burned it. I'm not going to lie and say I didn't know. I knew there was a plan. I knew Dad had talked to a doctor. I told myself it would be fine, that you'd understand eventually, that you'd forgive us because we're family. I didn't let myself think about what the plan actually meant. I didn't ask questions because I didn't want answers. That's not innocence. I know that now. That's cowardice. By the time I woke up from surgery and they told me it worked, I couldn't take it back. Your kidney was already inside me, and I told myself I'd find a way to make it right. I haven't. I can't. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I knew what they were doing was wrong, and I let it happen because I wanted to live. I'm writing because I want you to know that every day, every breath I take, I think about what it cost. I carry that weight. I'll carry it forever. You didn't owe us anything, Thea. You never did. I'm sorry. Marcus. I read it twice. Then I folded it, put it back in the envelope, and set it on my kitchen table. He wanted absolution, wanted me to write back saying I understood, that I forgave him, that blood was thicker than betrayal. I thought about the email he'd sent my father. She owes us anyway. I thought about the years he'd taken everything, my parents' attention, their money, their love, while I worked double shifts and built a life from nothing. I pulled out a notepad and started to write a reply. Then I stopped. Some things don't deserve a response. I threw the notepad away and made myself dinner. He would live with my kidney inside him. He would live knowing where it came from. That was enough. The trial took 4 months. 4 months of testimony, evidence, cross-examination. 4 months of watching my family's lawyers try to paint me as unstable, vindictive, a daughter who couldn't accept her parents' love. It didn't work. The emails were too damning, the medical records too clear. Dr. Mercer's testimony too specific. On a gray morning in March, the verdict came down. Guilty. All counts. All defendants. 1 month later, I returned to the federal courthouse for sentencing. The courtroom was fuller than the preliminary hearing. The case had made national news. Family organ theft ring exposed. Camera crews lined the steps outside. I sat in the gallery and watched the judge read from his prepared statement. Gerald Reynolds, this court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison. My father's face didn't change. He'd been stoic throughout the trial, convinced until the very end that he'd done nothing wrong. Linda Reynolds, this court sentences you to 8 years in federal prison. My mother collapsed into tears. Real ones this time, the ones she'd saved for when the performance no longer mattered. Marcus Reynolds, this court sentences you to 10 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. Marcus looked at me for the first time since the trial began. I couldn't read his expression. Regret? Resignation? I didn't care anymore. Dr. Howard Mercer, this court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison with permanent revocation of your medical license. The gavel fell one final time. Guards led them away. My father first, then my mother, then my brother. One by one, the people who had raised me disappeared through a side door. I sat in my seat until the courtroom emptied. Then I stood, walked outside, and felt the sun on my face for the first time in what felt like years. It was over. 1 year later. My apartment has more windows now. I moved to a 2-bedroom on the top floor. Still nothing fancy, but filled with light. Plants line the windowsills, pothos, snake plants, a fiddle-leaf fig I've somehow kept alive. A gray cat named Oliver sleeps in the sunbeam by the door. I'm still an OR nurse. Charge nurse now, actually. The promotion came through 6 months after the trial. My colleagues threw me a party in the break room, complete with a cake that said, "Congratulations, boss." Nathan gave a toast that made me cry. Once a month, I attend a support group for survivors of family abuse. We meet in a church basement, drink bad coffee, and share stories that would break most people. They don't break us. My kidney function is monitored regularly. The remaining one is healthy, doing the work of 2 without complaint. The scar on my back has faded to a thin silver line, visible if you know where to look, invisible if you don't. The restraining order against my parents and Marcus is permanent. They're not allowed to contact me, directly or indirectly, for the rest of their lives. Not that they would. My father hasn't spoken to me since his outburst in court. My mother sends letters sometimes, to my old address, returned unopened. Marcus stopped writing after I never replied. I don't miss them. That surprised me at first. I'd expected grief, longing, some ache for the family I'd lost. But you can't lose something you never had. What I had was a role in their story, the spare daughter, the backup plan, the parts they could harvest when needed. Now I have my own story, and it's mine. No one else's. Mine. I'm sitting in my favorite coffee shop as I tell you this. It's a Tuesday afternoon. Sunlight streams through the windows. My journal is open on the table. The first page still says what I wrote the day I moved into my new apartment. My body, my story, my rules. I won't pretend the past 2 years have been easy. Some nights I still wake up reaching for a scar that's no longer tender. Some days I see a family in the grocery store and feel something twist in my chest. But I don't regret what I did. I don't regret calling the police. I don't regret testifying. I don't regret watching the people who raised me walk into prison cells. Because here's what I've learned. Blood relation doesn't give anyone ownership of your body. Being family doesn't mean being entitled to pieces of you. Not your organs, not your time, not your sanity. The people who love you don't drug you and cut you open. They don't forge documents. They don't spend a decade thinking of you as spare parts. And if someone treats you that way, even if they share your DNA, you are allowed to walk away. You don't owe them an explanation. You don't owe them forgiveness. You don't owe them anything at all. I close my journal and finish my coffee. Outside, the world keeps moving. People pass on the sidewalk, living their own stories. I'm one of them now, not a victim, not a cautionary tale, just a woman who learned, the hardest way possible, that sometimes the